Okay, I think we're ready to start, folks. Thanks for your patience. Looks like we've got a pretty good list of participants. Thank you for joining us. Tonight is the Early Successional Habitat Creation Project Implementation public meeting. And I just wanted to quickly go over the purpose of the meeting with you and then go over the agenda really quickly so you can know exactly what to expect. It's a pretty tight agenda and we only have an hour and a half, so we're going to try and stay focused on it as best we can. My name is Jay Strand. I am the forest planner and the environmental coordinator for the Green Mountain National Forest. And we have 5 other folks who are helping out with the meeting. Jesse Pricknell, who is on our timber staff on the Manchester Ranger District, will be making a lot of the presentation tonight. We have Greg Flood, who is now acting as the wildlife biologist on the Manchester Ranger District. And we have Sean Langston, who is also a NEPA coordinator on the forest, who soon will be a wildlife biologist on the Manchester Ranger District. And I believe Jeff Tilley is going to join us as well. I haven't seen his name pop up yet, but he's a member of our timber staff who's going to help out as well. And of course, we have Martina Barnes. I can't forget her. She's the district ranger on the Manchester Ranger District, and she's the overall responsible official for this project. The purpose of the meeting tonight is simply to share information about 3 planned timber sales: the West River, the South Fork, and the Weston Priory timber sales to implement the Early Successional Habitat Project. And I'll go over that a little bit later in the agenda on exactly what that project is about. And Jesse, of course, will go into the specifics about each sale. But the point is that we'd like to share this information, and the meeting is kicking off a 30-day public comment period for us to invite you to provide information or input or feedback on these 3 sales to help us ensure that we comply with our Green Mountain National Forest Land and Resource Management Plan that we also call our Forest Plan, the direction in that plan, and also the protective measures that are part of the project environmental assessment. And we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. This meeting is not meant for us to discuss perceived inadequacies of the environmental assessment or the analysis of the disclosure of effects in that document. It's not meant for us to discuss perceived violations of any laws, regulations, or agency policy. It's specific to providing information for you to understand what we're planning to do to implement the project with these 3 sales and help us do a better job on the ground by complying with our plan and with the environmental assessment protective measures. I wanted to point out that we did develop a question and answer document. It's posted on our project website, and we'll post the location of that website in the chat box. And we want to point that out to you because there are a lot of questions that we received from the survey responses that we got from some of you when we rolled out the notification for this meeting a couple of weeks ago. And that document may have a lot of the answers to some of your questions that we're not going to be able to address tonight. So I just wanted to point that out to you. I also wanted to just say that real quick, a little bit of logistics on the Teams, Microsoft Teams online function here is that we're going to ask you to keep your mic muted at all times unless you've been asked to speak. Where there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions throughout the meeting. And if you have a question that you would like to ask, we simply ask you to use the reactions icon at the top of your Teams screen with the little round guy with a smiley face with his hand raised. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you in the order that your hand is raised in that function. Or you can simply type your question in the chat box and we will read them out loud and try to answer the relevant questions as best we can for you to better understand what we're rolling out here for you and during this meeting. And very quickly, before I hand it off to Martina for her opening remarks, I just wanted to quickly go over the agenda. Jesse, can you see that okay?
Sure can.
Okay, great. So this is our agenda that we'll be following today. And Martina will start things off with an introduction with some opening remarks. And then I will provide a brief overview of the project history and implementation process for the project itself, including going over the implementation guide that we've developed, the specialist review process to ensure that we're complying with forest plan direction and project-specific protective measures, and the public involvement part of this process of implementation. And next, Jesse will go over some of the information regarding the timber sales that we have scheduled for implementation, specific to the locations and some of the planned dates for when we would like to prepare and advertise and award these timber sales. And then she's going to go over each of the timber sales that we're going to talk about tonight, providing maps and treatment acres and any access needs specific to these sales for the West River, the South Fork, and the Weston Priory timber sale. And as you can see, there's some time set aside for each of these little presentations that she'll make for each of these projects to answer any questions that you might have specific to those timber sales. Then I'll go over the field trip that we are no longer tentatively having. We're going to definitely schedule it and have it on June 22nd and go over the next steps after this meeting. And then we'll close out with any remaining questions at the end of the session today. I knew I could find the right one there sooner or later. So Jesse, or I'm sorry, Martina, would you like to take over from here and provide some of your opening remarks, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Martina Barnes. I'm the district ranger on the Manchester Ranger District. And I know we've all gotten used to the Teams thing now, or a Zoom thing with COVID, but in the future, I'm actually looking forward to maybe having these meetings in person to get to know you better and not just see your name and icon on a screen. But in the meantime, here we are. Wanted to thank you for coming tonight and just, you know, kind of reiterate some of what Jay said, that it's my desire as the district ranger to have the public be involved not only through the NEPA process, the planning process, but also into the implementation phase of some of these projects, or all of the projects that we have going on the Manchester Ranger District. And this, I think, is one opportunity to engage the public through the implementation phase to ensure the compliance that we have with the forest plan, and to make sure we're, you know, meeting those site-specific design criteria. So I'm glad you're interested in this project, and I hope some of you may come out for the field trip, which is scheduled on June 22nd. And for future timber sales, we're not quite sure yet if we are able to have an in-person meeting versus a virtual meeting to present some of the information that you'll be hearing tonight. And then we may also, if there is interest for future timber sales, we'll also plan to offer the field visits for folks. So yeah, so I wanted just to thank everyone again and just reiterate my commitment to public input throughout the implementation, and also just wanted to reiterate a little bit of what Jay said, that this is that I hope you will show grace and respect for the presenters tonight as they present the information about the timber sales, and to please, the chat is primarily to be used for sharing information related to the presentation tonight. And if you do have comments or questions that aren't related to the information that's being presented tonight, to please feel free to contact me over email or by phone, or Jay Strand after the meeting, so that we can, engage and talk about other questions you have. But we really want to try to stay focused on the topic at hand, and I hope you will respect that request. So, and we'll be sharing my contact info as well as Jay's at the end of the meeting. So with that, I think I'm going to be passing it back to Jay to give a project overview. And again, just thanks so much for your interest, and we're looking forward to having an open dialogue and hopefully some good questions and answers following or during the presentation. So Jay, back to you.
Thank you, Martina. I'm going to now just quickly go over the project history and then go into the implementation process so you can better understand how we are going about implementing the project that was included in the environmental assessment for this project that was completed in 2019. And Martina approved the activities that were analyzed and the effects disclosed in that environmental assessment document in a decision notice in late June of 2019. After the decision notice was signed, and by the way, the project, the purpose and need of the project is pretty specific and focused. The wildlife biologist at the time, Brett Hillman, had conducted inventory, and he was working with some of our partners to look at perhaps creating more early successional habitat, and we define that as the forest age class from 0 to 9 years of age. It's called the regenerating age class in our forest plan. And that age class is important for a variety of wildlife species that depend on it for at least part of their life cycle. A whole suite of wildlife species, but the specific focus primarily was to provide this habitat for passerine birds or neotropical migrant birds. And so there's a lot of benefits for this type of habitat. Our forest plan objective for this age class across forests where we are able to manage through harvesting timber to be from 5 to 20% of that land area. In the existing inventory at the time that Brett did his initial work for this project, prior to the completion of the environmental assessment and rolling it out for a proposed action that triggered the environmental analysis process in the first place to follow the National Environmental Policy Act, was less than 1%. So, the amount of early successional habitat across the Manchester Ranger District is very minimal and not anywhere close to the objectives of what our forest plan provides for these forest habitat types. And so basically the purpose of the project is to fill the gap between the existing condition of around 1% of that age class to get it closer towards the 5 to 20%, depending on the forest habitat type, because different forest habitat types have different objectives. So there's a lot of information about that in the forest plan itself. But that's where the project was originated from. And as I said, the decision notice was signed by Martina in June of 2019, and we did actually begin to implement it. 2 timber sales were prepared, advertised, and sold in 2020. The Bullybrook timber sale and the Old Job timber sale, and they're up in the northern part of the Manchester Ranger District. And they've just started to implement a little bit of those sales. One sale, not at all. The Old Job they haven't started yet, and a little bit on the Bullybrook timber sale up there close to Wallingford. But right after that, in early 2021, we realized through communication with some of our public contacts and partners that there were still some real remaining concerns regarding the amount of road building that was approved as part of the decision notice. And that approved activity in the decision notice called for up to 25 miles of either permanent or temporary road construction to access timber harvest areas across the district to implement the project. And there was a lot of concern that the environmental impacts from that amount of road building was a little bit too much and out of balance for the needs of addressing the habitat objectives of the project. And so we took a really hard look at it, reconsidered it, and decided to pull back on all permanent road construction and limiting temporary road construction to a little over 8.5 miles of road and temporary roads. Temporary roads also would have to follow existing woods roads, so they wouldn't be constructed in new ground. And so that was the caveat that we looked at and decided by doing so, we would not harvest any areas that were originally approved in June of 2019 beyond a 1/2 mile of existing permanent roads. So to summarize really quickly, we reduced the amount of harvest area to be within a 1/2 mile of existing roads. So anything beyond 1/2 mile of existing roads would be dropped from the original decision. We will not construct any permanent roads. And if we need any temporary roads, they would only be constructed in existing woods roads locations and only up to a little over 8.5 miles. So that's the new set of approved activities beyond Old Job and the Bullybrook timber sales that we will be implementing over the course of the life of this project, which is 15 years from the date of the decision. So that would be approximately 2034, right? If my math is correct. And we would harvest up to 14,200 and I believe 70 acres is the new upper limit from the 15,000 acres that was in the original approved activities. Keeping in mind that those 15,000 acres was out of a pool of over 17,000 acres that we could consider for harvest treatment. So that upper limit that we can pull from is now dropped down to 14,270. So that is the new suite of activities that we're looking at to implement from this day forward, beginning with these 3 timber sales. And so the way that we implement, we follow a very specific and pretty detailed implementation guide, which has been posted into the chat box. It's also on our website, project website, that you can take a close look at your convenience after this meeting. But it lines out exactly how we want to implement the projects by timber sale on an annual basis as we move forward to implement the project. And it's meant to get projects rolled out and begin planning about 2 years ahead of when we actually would like to advertise and sell those sales to begin implementing them on the ground. There's 3 checklists that are filled out. The first checklist 1, is filled out by the timber staff, and they do the initial planning on where they want to actually start to conduct and lay out and prepare these sales. And that checklist provides the stands that are proposed for treatment and the treatment types and where they're located on the ground, along with access needs. That's shared with our resource specialists, and our resource specialists fill out checklist 2, and they spend time out in the field where these sales are planned, and they conduct inventory and collect information and review the ground conditions to ensure that what is being planned, it complies with forest plan standards and guidelines, and also the project-specific design criteria or protective measures for their respective resources of responsibility. They document that in checklist 2, and if it's not in compliance, the unit layouts have to be modified or dropped altogether. Checklist 3 is actually filled out by Martina as the district ranger to ensure that what the resource specialists find in their inventory and review, documented in checklist 2, is incorporated into the actual final layout on the ground before the sale is advertised and sold. The specialist review process is a very, very important part of the implementation process for obvious reasons, because we do not want to not be in compliance with our forest plan direction or our project-specific protective measures. It's important to point out that the forest plan, the link is going to be posted in the chat box for you to find out where our forest plan is located on our Green Mountain National Forest website. But the standards and guidelines are in chapters 2, where all the forest-wide standards and guidelines are located. In the management areas where timber harvesting will take place in this project are included in chapter 3. The standards and guidelines for those management areas are in chapter 3. And you can look at the forest plan and take a look at those standards and guidelines and what they consist of. And the design criteria that is Appendix B in the project environmental assessment is also should be placed in the chat for you to be able to look at, but it is also in on our project website. And it lines out all of the criteria to protect resources, and they're organized by the specific resources that those design criteria are meant to protect in the first place. So that's the baseline for what our specialists use to review these sale areas on the ground to make sure that what we're doing falls within the range of environmental effects that were disclosed in the environmental assessment. The public involvement is probably the most, is also one of the most important parts of what we're in here now. This meeting is part of the public involvement process as we implement. This is not part of the NEPA process. The National Environmental Policy Act has a very specific requirement for how the public is involved when we disclose effects in that environmental assessment. What we're doing now is totally to the discretion of Martina as the responsible official, and we feel, and she feels, it's very important that you remain involved as we implement this project over the course of the next 13 years now. And so what we'll plan to do is have public meetings either virtually in the future. Hopefully, maybe we can start doing these in person. We also will have the opportunity for field trips to look at the actual sale sites on the ground to see what they look like, answer questions, and become more familiar with what we're trying to do on the ground with these sales. And for this project, we have, I mentioned already, the June 22nd has been set aside for a field visit to look at one or more of those sales on the ground. And last but not least, there's a 30-day comment period that we are specifically asking you to submit comments in writing to us that provides input that will help or ensure that we're complying with the forest plan direction and the design criteria, and that we have a better product on the ground. And there also might be something that we may have overlooked, perhaps some access to a hunting camp or to some adjacent private land, whatever the case may be. We may not know about it, and that's why we're asking you to be involved and point these things out to us as we lay out the timber sales on the ground prior to advertising them and selling them to a timber sale contractor. So that's it in a nutshell. I want to now pass it off to Jesse. And like I said, there will be question and answers after each sale that she provides information for. And we also have held time at the very end of the meeting to ask for you to ask general questions that we can address and maybe make some clarifications on some of the things that we're presenting. So Jesse, you can go ahead and take it from here.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Let me just bring it up. Looks like Laura Simon has a question already. Jay, is that something you want to field now?
Hello, I could not find the chat. My question is, what will be the cost of this plan? Not just the cutting, but all the meetings, the paying the staff when they're attending all this, the total expense to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't have a specific expenses or the cost of how much the agency is spending to prepare and implement these sales. It's incorporated into our overall budget for all of the activities that we conduct on the Green Mountain National Forest. Martina, do you have anything to add about that?
No, I don't. I mean, Yeah, I mean, we could provide, I mean, obviously our government salaries are public information, and as well as our budget. It would, be a matter of calculating the number of time, hours. It would be a fairly involved process to come up with that exact or approximate number, I imagine. But if you want to have a conversation offline, I think it was Laura, I'm happy to do that to help give you maybe a better picture of maybe our forest budget, our annual forest budget. And it would be a rough estimate, but it might help to answer your question.
Hi, Laura. Does that answer your question?
No, of course not. I would have to go through all of your salaries, figure out what percentage of time you're spending on this project, and then get whatever it is the other expenses are. This is taxpayer money. It should be a very clear figure that we can weigh. Is it worth cutting all these trees for that amount of money? So I'm not happy with that answer.
Yeah, we'll do the best we can. What I can suggest we can do is to add to the question and answer document for any questions that come up that aren't already on there that we can't address here and now, and isn't really specific to the input that we're trying to get relative to implementing these sales on the ground, to meet the purpose of and the intent of what we're trying to do here with this meeting and with the public comment period. So we'll try and do that. And if it's not satisfactory to you, then like Martina said, you can contact either her or I, and we can have a more detailed or specific conversation about it at that time. Thank you. I think we need to move on for Jessie to present her information. And if you want to go ahead and take it from here, Jessie.
Right on, yeah. Just so you guys know, my name's Jessie Prutznell. I am the pre-sale forester here on the Manchester Ranger District. And I'm here to share some information about the ESH sales that are up and coming. So to get started, I'd like to share my screen with you to show you some maps of what we're going to be talking about. So hopefully at this point, everyone can see my screen. If not, go ahead and put something in the chat. I have it relatively zoomed in right now because I want you to be able to see the a little bit more detail. I can zoom out at the end, but I just want to point out the general vicinity of where our sales are. So West River, we have located here, Mount Holly, and Weston area. This little tiny yellow dot here, that one is Weston Priory. And then if we go farther south, we have the South Fork Timber Sale here in Sunderland and Glastonbury. As far as when we plan to advertise these, what our anticipated advertised date is so for Weston Priory, I'll come back up so you can see it. So for Weston Priory, we're looking at July of 2022. For West River, we are looking for April of 2023. And then for South Fork down below, that is August of 2022. So some of these are relatively soon, some are a little farther down the road, and just so you get a grander scale of what we're looking at. So again, I'm circling West River here. Weston Priory is hard to see at this scale, and it's over here. And then South Fork is in this area here. And I'm hoping everyone can see my cursor as I move it around the screen. So I want to move into the West River sale and get a little bit more specific about each sale. So this is the West River sale area. The map is broken up into color-coded by prescription type or harvest treatment. I use the word prescription, but harvest treatment is the one we'll try to use throughout the meeting today. So we have 6 different harvest treatments that we're looking to implement throughout this area. Let me just look at my notes to make sure. So we have some access needs that we have to get in here. So you can look at the proposed landing locations are in green. We have also some bridges that will be also in play in the different colors. You can use the legend to help color code it, but I want to leave this up just a little bit so you have a chance to look at it while I talk. But one thing to note here is that these stands may look as though they're kind of squiggly and arbitrary lines, but they're not. And by the way, my big screen is over on this side, so I might not be looking directly at you, so I apologize for that. But so stands, which each one of these blocks are based on composition, structure, density, as well as condition. And each stand is evaluated by a trained silviculturist, and they determine the treatment type, depending on the stand condition. So I want to share with you a little bit about the acreage itself. So I'm going to bring up this Excel spreadsheet. So this is the sale that we're talking about right now. So this is broken up by proposed by stand, how many acres each stand is, and then how many acres will be implemented and actually cut. So for example, we have clear cut with reserves, which if you want more information on each individual harvest treatment and what that means, we have this handy little graph, not quite a graph, but a table that shares what each description for each prescription entails. So for example, if we talk about clear-cut reserves, it's a temporary opening, usually greater than 5 acres, and then at least 5% of the stand is going to be retained, typically for wildlife trees, things with cavities or sloughing bark that wildlife like to use. We also like to retain good pole-sized timber for future future generations. And then we also like to leave sometimes large mast trees that will cast seeds so that the area can regenerate. So as we look at that, you can see the numbers. I won't go through each number exactly, but I will explain the graph. And so we have group selection as well. Group selection is usually sizes up to 2 acres. It can be as small as like a 1/4 acre large, and it's used for more of a uneven aged regeneration. It's really great prescription to use for if we want to do aspen regeneration. We also have improvement with groups, which is kind of the group selection part of it is part of the harvest treatment itself. But the improvement part, and I'm just going to look at my notes to make sure I say this correctly, it will occur between the groups. So, and it's usually just to improve the stand, to remove unacceptable growing stock and poorly formed trees so that the stand can be more productive and healthier. So we also have patch clear cuts. These are typically 5 acres or so in size. They're great for when we want to get a lot of light on the ground. So say for some reason we have an area with a lot of poorly formed beech regeneration because of the beech bark disease, we may implement a patch clear cut because the regeneration that is going to come up is not going to amount to a healthy forest. It will be pretty unhealthy as a stand. So what we like to do is get some light on the ground and encourage species that are shade intolerant, like birch and cherry and aspen, and they'll they'll regenerate in stands like this. So we also have shelterwood with reserves, which is where we're retaining good seed stock for the stand. The portion of the existing overstory is retained, but it also provides shelter for the regeneration below. So if we have shade kind of mid-tolerant species like sugar maple and red maple, they can take hold in there quite well. And sometimes we do a removal of the overstory that we had left. Sometimes we leave it. It kind of depends on the health of the stand itself. And then we have this shelter wood with reserves and group selection, which is kind of group selection shelter wood mixed in together, where you would have a shelter wood and maybe a stand, and then you'd have groups sprinkled throughout where it makes sense to put them. Maybe you have an area where there's a lot of dying trees and you want to try to regenerate what's below there. Maybe we have some really good, regen species that are coming up. So as you can see, the proposed acres as a total is 739 acres, but the estimated implementation is 542. Now we expect this number to drop even more because for, just to point something out when it comes to group selection, typically group selection, what we're saying here is that there's 238 acres of stand acres. And then in those stands, only 20% of it is going to be treated, which would equate to 20% of this 212 acres, which would only equal to 42 acres in total. So that's giving us about a rough estimate of 500, which in a reduction percentage, that's 32% from the original 739. Let me just check my notes to make sure that I'm covering everything that I would like to. Just to go back to the map here really quick, I wanted to talk a little bit about access needs. You may notice there's this kind of mahogany colored line where it's labeled down here as a temporary road. This is on an existing template. There's already a legacy road that is in there. So it's the length, I think I measured it on GIS because I know from the landing directly to the road is about 500 feet. So this would only be a tiny bit longer than that. But again, it's on an existing road template, which we're allowed. And with that, I would like to ask if anyone has any specific questions to West River. And because I'm sharing my screen, I'm going to continue to share my screen so that we can toggle back and forth between documents. I'll ask that one of my team members let me know if there's a hand up so that I may answer that question. Just giving a little bit of moment of dead air for anybody that's still trying to find their mute button. And just to reiterate, yes, this is scheduled to be implemented in April of 2023 for West River. So hearing no questions, I do want to move into South Fork. So again, this is located in Sunderland and Glastonbury. Just a smidgen of it is located in Glastonbury in the southern part here. So again, it's broken up by prescription type or I gotta keep saying harvest treatment type. And oh, I see that there might be a hand up. I was hoping that somebody would tell me. Zach, sorry, I don't see your last name. Do you happen to have a question?
Thanks. This is Zach Porter. I'm the Executive Director of Standing Trees, and I appreciate the meeting tonight and the chance to ask you questions about all of this. And my question that I put in the chat that I'm hoping you might be able to share for each of these is if you have a map available that shows the forest plan management areas with the timber sale units overlaid, that would just be helpful as a person trying to just, like you asked for at the outset of the meeting, scrutinize the appropriateness of the management actions here with the forest plan. If that's not available right at this moment, if that map could be made available, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yes, we could definitely do something like that. Let me make a note. So we're looking to have the management area overlaid And I can actually share that with you exactly which management area each of these are in. So with what we just spoke about with West River, that's in diverse forest use. And then South Fork, which we're just beginning to talk about, that is diverse backcountry. So again, we'll definitely get on. It should be a really quick GIS exercise to do that, so not a problem. So just getting back, unless there's any other questions, I'll move on. All right.
There aren't any hands up, Jesse.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for because I have just a tiny little screen for Teams right now, so I can't see if hands are up. The only way I could do that is I stop sharing my screen, and I have a feeling questions will involve what I'm sharing, so I want to continue sharing. So the support from you guys to let me know if there's a hand up will be much appreciated. So because I've already kind of gone over the prescription types and what they mean, I'm not going to cover those again. Unless you have specific questions about them, we can talk about that more. So this one with South Fork, again, looking to implement in August of 2022 or to advertise in August of 2022. And we are looking at 4 different prescription types here. There are some needs for access, and most of them will be along Forest Road 85 here. This landing north, kind of off of Kelly Stand here, I don't remember that one being in the original map, so I'll have to look into it a little bit, but I have a feeling that because we have a good smattering of ones along the road, this is a very likely candidate to be dropped. We don't use all of our landings. We have proposed landings, but the actual layout of the sail will be within these stands, but also will be much smaller than the stand appear on the map. So when the wood moves, it'll most likely go to along this 85 road here. So the acres, just to review that, we can go back to our handy dandy little, nope, I didn't mean to make that bigger. I'm just trying to highlight it so it's easier to see. So this is the sale that we're talking about. With this, there's a little bit of discrepancy here. So I noticed there's a shelterwood with reserves and group selection. What ended up happening is we broke those up and put the shelterwoods where we're going to put the shelterwoods in the number here on line 11, and then where we're going to implement the groups on line 10. So those kind of prescriptions that are put together on the map are later broken up here on this table. And the reason being is we've had a little bit more time to look at this sale. So the acres that we're going to be sharing with you today are going to be more truer to what implementation is going to be like on the ground in comparison to what West River is. West River, we haven't done any, well, we have done some recon, but not as extensive as we have in South Fork. So we have a better idea of what we're actually going to implement on the ground with South Fork. So again, looking at clear cut with reserves, group selection, and shelterwood with reserves. We have a total acreage of proposed for 696, and that's gone down to 226 for acreage for what might actually be implemented. I'm sure this number will still reduce because we have mitigations in place and buffers in place and stuff to that effect. But again, it's about a 67% reduction in what we originally proposed. So again, this is diverse backcountry, located in Sunderland, Glastonbury, looking to advertise in August of 2022. And I would like to field any questions that anyone may have about South Fork timber sale.
Jesse, we have a question in the chat box. The question is, why does it make sense to clear cut adjacent to a wetland? And there's an example northwest of 85. I'm not sure exactly where that would be.
Northwest of 85. I'm guessing, let's see, clear cut. I'm guessing they're talking about here. So it won't be directly adjacent because we do have mitigations and the forest plan with standards and guidelines that we do have to abide by. So there will be a buffer area that will be away from this area. It's just the treatment type that would take place within the stand. That doesn't mean that the clear cut is going to be directly adjacent to the wetland. It would most likely be pulled back and be mostly along the road here with the adequate buffer distance away from the wetland. And I hope that answers that question. If not, feel free to post in the chat box again.
Yeah, and that said, Jesse, we also have a forest plan guideline that requires a 100-foot buffer from the edge of all wetlands for all harvest activity, not just clear cuts.
Right.
We have a question from Zach Porter. Zach, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you, Jay. And yeah, on this one, I was curious. I can't quite locate the location of the sale in comparison to a map that you all previously prepared, probably several years ago now, that I have showing the both roadless area conservation rule roadless areas and the 2006 forest plan roadless areas. But it looks to me like this sale might be located within the Glastonbury inventory roadless area, which is the largest roadless area in Vermont, in between the undesignated non-wilderness portion of that roadless area and the Glastonbury, wilderness designated by Congress. And I'm wondering if you could help me understand the rationale. I understand that these stands were approved for potential harvest activity with the 2019 decision document, but every year we learn more and more that roadless areas have exceptional value, and the science only becomes clearer that it makes no sense to be logging in roadless areas, much less other important landscapes. And I'm just wondering, you have the discretion right now to determine where to locate these timber sales based on what was approved in 2019. And there are clearly areas where there would be less impact, even if I don't personally agree with the logging in the West River sale, for example. This area here has so little reason to log, and only growing scientific evidence pointing to why this should be, set aside. So I'm wondering, as you're doing this reassessment right now, as you will continue to for the next 13 years to determine where to do these sales, why not look away from the roadless areas and work in other landscapes that are both, maybe a little bit more scientifically sound and certainly less politically controversial. And so if you could explain to me the rationale there and any potential opportunity to look elsewhere, I would be really interested in hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Zach. That specific question is addressed in the question and answer document that we mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting. Unfortunately, what we posted, I guess, the document itself can't be opened up in the new version of Teams that we seem to be operating under that we just discovered during this meeting, but it is on our project website. So I would ask you to go review what has been written in response to that very specific question, Zach. And if you have any remaining questions or concerns about it, then you can call me directly and we can have a conversation about it. And or you can just submit your input in a comment during this 30-day comment period. I do want to say, right up front that roadless areas protected by the roadless area conservation rule, there's no harvest activities approved in this project that are within those inventory roadless areas. There are some located in roadless areas that were identified during forest plan revision, required through the planning regulation requirements for forest plan revision as part of the process to recommend wilderness areas for designation through the forest plan. And that was done. This was part of the process. Those inventory roadless areas are within the project areas, approved harvest areas, and those impacts to that resource, those values are disclosed in the environmental assessment. And you can go back and look at that as well. So why don't you look at the response to the question and answer document specific to that question, and then get back with me or Martina if you have any additional concerns or questions if you don't feel like it adequately addresses it, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I will look at it. I have not seen that document yet, but I do just want to, for the public record, say here that each of these sales is clearly being evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and that's a part of the conditions-based analysis that you all are performing for this project. And you have every bit of authority to conduct timber sales in locations other than roadless areas as this project moves forward, in addition to avoiding the White Rocks National Recreation Area. So I'm simply asking you tonight that as you evaluate moving forward, that you do timber sales in areas that are not roadless areas, that are not areas designated by Congress as the White Rocks National Recreation Area. Thank you.
You are welcome. And there's a question and answer specific to the White Rocks National Recreation Area in that same document. So I encourage you to take a look at it. And if you have any additional concerns or questions about it, again, contact me or Martina, and we'll try to address your concern as best we can, Zach.
All right, thanks, Jay, for fielding that. Is there any other additional questions before I move on? Hearing none, and oh, go ahead, Martina.
I was just gonna say, it looks like there, oh, maybe that was Zach, but okay, maybe it's gone now, or maybe it's still there. I can't tell. Oh, it's gone. Okay. I thought it was a hand, but we're good, I think.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to stop me if you know, if I've missed you, and then at the end we can definitely go backtrack a little if we need to answer any questions. But with that being said, I do want to move forward with Weston Priory. So this is the map associated with Weston Priory. Here is the unit here in blue. There's a landing that they are proposing in this location where that little maroon dot is. Weston Priory has direct access road to where we're proposing the to the landing, and which is a flexible location. They're all landings are subject to agreement, and they will have no need for temporary roads. It'll just be direct access to their property. So as far as that goes, and then clear cut with reserves is what we're looking at. There's a don't see it on this map, but there is like a cutout that we have here that we're going to do went during implementation for Weston Priory. This is kind of akin to South Fork, where we've had a chance to go and look at it and work with the Priory to figure out what their, you know, to have their comments be heard. And I think that's about all I want to say on Weston Priory before I move to the table. So this, I think, kind of speaks for itself. We proposed 8. We're looking to implement 7. It's a 13% reduction. And again, the harvest treatment, I almost said prescription again. The harvest treatment is clear cut with reserves, which there is reserves in there, given some of the species that they would like to retain, which is, I don't know, I'm excited about it. I think it'll provide a vista for them. And there's some very it's not the healthiest stand. It could use some help, and it isn't going to be at this point, as far as we know, it's not going to be retained permanently. It's just a temporary opening. So with that being said, do we have any questions about Weston Priory? And just to reiterate, this is diverse forest use for MA, for the management area. So it's diverse forest use for this sale. And again, we are looking to advertise in July of 2022. Let me put this up too, so you can look at that while you're thinking of anything you may ask.
Doesn't look like there's any. Got a hand. We have a question from Cheryl Joy Lipton. Cheryl, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I think this is taking a while to unmute. My thing is not working very well. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, it doesn't say that I'm unmuted. I wonder what the age, when the last time all of the stands were cut, how old the existing forest is. When the last cut was.
So if we talk about Weston Priory, to the best of my knowledge, Brother Augustine, he says that when he was younger and first starting at the Priory, that there was a couple of white pine in this area, but the rest of it was cleared. As far as South Fork and West River goes, we do have a age class map that we put together to answer those such questions. And is there anything else you want to say about it, Jay?
I was just going to say that very thing, Jesse. We, in response to a request for this information, we prepared age class maps for all the stands within all the remaining areas of the entire project, and also separate maps specific to these 3 timber sales. So you can go on our project website and you can see the age of origin for each of these stands that are subject to these harvest treatments for these 3 sales there. If you have any questions about that information, when you look at it online, feel free to give us a call or contact us, and we'll try and clarify any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks. And the Western Priory, when the brother, whoever was a child. So when was that? I don't know that. Is that also on that document?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, and again, as Jay said, if there's anything on there that you have questions about, or if anything seems confusing, please do reach out to us and we're happy to answer your questions. Because sometimes a map doesn't always speak for itself. And with, oh, go ahead.
We have a question in the chat box. Could you redefine clear cut with reserves?
Could I redefine it? Of course. So there is a handy, like I said, this timber harvest treatment approved in it's in the EA and decision notice. Clear cut reserves, it creates a temporary opening of greater than 5 acres, so typically 5 acres and greater, of at least 5% of the stand will be retained. And typically what is retained is wildlife trees, so trees with cavities or sloughing bark, where like bats or raccoons or whatever species you can think of that would use a tree cavity would go into. We also try to keep any large diameter trees, and if there's existing we call it acceptable growing stock, but essentially a nice tree that will be a beautiful tree in the future that will provide lots of seed and great genes is the word I'm looking for. Not like your blue jeans, but like begins with a G, genes. And it provides good genes for the future. So that's kind of clear cuts the clear cut with reserves kind of in a nutshell. It usually, so also when it comes to like clear cutting and also patch clear cutting, it results in a diverse mix of native tree species, and it usually favors less shade tolerant disturbance species such as white birch and aspen, which is actually declining in our region because we have such mature forests. There's not much of it. But it can also be used to reduce the competitiveness of beech affected by beech bark disease, and reduce the amount of forest dominated by diseased beech, which is generally less diverse and less productive. And all of these, and I just want to say as an overarching, so in addition to the benefits of early successional habitat and more diverse forest habitats, all of these treatments can increase the diversity of forest conditions on the landscape in terms of like species composition, forest structure, size, and age class. And it also increases resilience and reduces the vulnerability to increasing stresses resulting in climate change. And I think I'll stop there unless there's any more questions that I can field. I think.
Yeah, there are a few.
Okay.
Jesse, maybe not necessarily you, but there is a question about the benefits, or maybe not the benefits of the clear cut in this situation for any wildlife species. Greg Flood, our wildlife biologist on staff here on the meeting, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, that's a good question, Bob. And I think, for those who aren't in the chat, the question reads, wouldn't it be easier for a bird to find habitat if it had not, or if it had a whole natural forest to choose from rather than an acre of stumps? And I can understand, Bob, that kind of sentiment that you're going with there. And one of the things Jesse had just talked about was kind of creating that diverse forest that we're looking at. So with that, we're going to have, or with a clear cut in this case, we're going to have that diversity on the landscape where we're going to be able to have multiple species utilizing that habitat at one time and be able to kind of create that habitat diversity that we're looking for. So, I mean, we're talking about neotropical migrants. We're talking about some of our other bobcats, snowshoe hares, grouse, woodcock. They're all going to utilize this this habitat. And an interesting article from a couple of years ago came out and even was able to demonstrate that some of our forest interior bird species will utilize these openings that are going to be created through this project for foraging outside of the fledgling season, and will actually create a body index score that's higher than if they didn't have the diversity on the landscape. So I appreciate your question. And speaking specifically to habitat, a species that needs that early successional habitat is going to find an easier time finding a home versus if it was just a even age stand where he wouldn't belong or she wouldn't belong. So thank you.
Jay, are you seeing the question in the chat? It looks like
Yeah, I do. I see Bob's question. I can read that one and respond to it. We also have Cheryl with her hand up again. So I'll address Bob's question first, and then Cheryl, you can unmute your mic and ask your question. Bob's question in the chat is, can you please speak to the trade-off of your plan versus leaving the trees for the ongoing sequestering of carbon? So first, I just want to point you to the environmental assessment for the project. There's a section in Chapter 3 of that environmental assessment that speaks specific to greenhouse gas emissions and the carbon cycle effects specific from or resulting from project activities that were approved in the decision notice for the project. We definitely, there is a trade-off. And what we try to do is we balance the recognition that forests are an important natural element to sequester carbon from the atmosphere and store it. And older forests do store more carbon than younger forests. Sequestering, on the other hand, the rate of sequestration is faster in younger forests, but the amount of carbon that they store is not as great as older forests. So it's a pretty nuanced, complicated science, and trying to put it into a simplistic answer in this meeting would be impossible. But you asked our trade-off perspective, and it basically boils down to that. We feel that it is important to provide healthy forests, diverse habitat types in terms of age class and forest composition to provide for a diverse range of wildlife species that depend on those habitats, not to mention the health of the forest to begin with. And so diverse and healthy forests actually do have a higher rate of capacity for sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. But at the same time, we recognize that intact older stands are important as well to address carbon storage and carbon sequestration. So it's the balance of both together, trying to address habitat needs and those objectives while recognizing that we're not harvesting other parts of the forest and that they continue to function as older forests, storing more carbon than younger forests. And I encourage you to look at that environmental assessment, and there's a lot of scientific documentation that supports that analysis. And if you have any questions about that, I encourage you to contact me and or Martina, and we'll see if we can get more to the bottom of what you're looking for with that question. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to ask her question. I'm muting the mic.
Yes, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. One of my questions is that my chat is not working, and so I'm not able to, my whole computer is not working very nicely. And I'm not able to get the links from the chat, and so I'm hoping that you're going to send that out as an email, perhaps. But I probably can find it anyhow on my own. The other thing that I wanted to do is to ask if the actual, and you sort of started to answer this a little bit. I don't know if this detail is in the documents. And that is a question about about the amount of stored carbon. Have you estimated that? And is that in the documentation? The amount of stored carbon estimated. That's one part of the question, and I'll wait and say the rest after you answer that.
The environmental assessment discloses overall the forest baseline carbon that that is stored above ground in the biomass, woody biomass. So it does show the amount that's estimated forest wide in that document. So I encourage you to take a look at that and see if you have any further questions specific to that, and get back to us and let us know.
Okay, yeah, the question is how much biomass, how much carbon is being cut, not how much is in the whole forest. So like per acre or whatever. So if that's not there, I guess I'll contact you. The other thing is that I wanted to comment on something you just said, is that the research that you're using on sequestration being faster, higher in young forest than in old forest it's old research, and it's not current knowledge. And really the highest rate of sequestration comes when a forest when trees are in their mid hundreds, so 120, 150 years old. That's when maximum storage sequestration begins. So that's really important. It's like, I'm not sure what research, I'm not sure why so many people are using that old news, and it's a little frustrating. And that's kind of partly why I wanted to know the ages of the forests. So that's it.
Yeah, Cheryl, I understand your question. I understand your concern. I actually understand the comment that you just made about competing science, and in some cases contradicting science regarding this very issue. We don't have time to get into the nuances of it here in this meeting. Again, check out the environmental assessment, look at the scientific literature that disclosure of effects in that assessment is based on, and then we can have a continued conversation about it. If you wish, just contact me or Martina.
Okay, thanks again.
You're welcome. Okay. I don't see any more specific questions.
Looks like Alan has his hand up.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can take one more
One
question now, and
question.
then I'm sorry, Alan, we're just going to take your question, and then we're going to finish up the agenda. There's time to ask overall questions at the very end. But go ahead, Alan.
This is an overall question, so I'll wait till the very end.
Okay, fair enough. It won't take too long to finish up the agenda. So basically, the next part of the agenda is just to go over the next steps, what we're going to do after this meeting. And like I said at the very beginning, this is the kickoff of the 30-day comment period where we are inviting your written comments specific to these 3 sales for the reasons that we expressed at the beginning. To help us ensure that we are implementing the projects on these sales in compliance with our forest plan direction and the design criteria that's included in the decision notice environmental assessment for the project. All that information is posted and filed on our project website. So the end of the comment period is July 8th. We sent out a notification email. Hopefully everybody received that. In an email from us today, just this afternoon. It includes the directions on how to submit comments. So take a look at that, and if you wish, you are able to provide that input to us. And so together with the comment that we are inviting from you, we also would like to have a field visit or a field trip to at least one of the timber sales. Maybe 2. It depends on how much time we'll be able to have to look at what hopefully would be helpful or meaningful for anybody who is interested in attending. And so with that in mind, if someone could paste the survey link into the chat box, there's a survey that we'd like you to take if you're interested in the field trip to express that in the survey, but more importantly, if you are going to attend, what specifically you would like to look at based on maybe what you've learned during this meeting or if after you had a chance to look more closely at the information that we have on our website. That's on June 22nd, and we'll figure out where to meet. The sales, as you know, are down in the southern part of Vermont, so for some of you that might require a bit of traveling, but we'll figure out a good meeting spot, and then we'll caravan to the actual sales sites to take a look at whatever it is that that we hear from you that you want to look at on the ground. We'll send out the details of the itinerary and instructions on where to meet once we've heard back from everybody, hopefully by the end of this week, so that we can get that itinerary out to you all by sometime early next week or mid next week, so everybody can plan accordingly. The comments that we receive through July 8th, we'll compile them and we will look at them and consider them. We want to keep focused on meaningful input that folks provide us that are going to help us make a better product on the ground. So it's very simple. We have resource specialists that are helping us do that, specific to their resources of responsibility. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, there may be some things that we may not be aware of in these 3 specific sale area sites on the forest. So that's what we're interested in hearing from you. And if there's anything that we can address in the final layout of these timber sales, we will certainly try to do so. And whatever comments that you provide, in whatever form or manner those comments come in a written way, we will put them together in a document so that we can respond to them and show you how we consider them and whether it resulted in any change or not to the sale area, just so you're not left hanging. If you take the time to respond and provide input, you deserve a response from us on how they're considered. And so bottom line is, based on that input and based on the results of our own resource specialist review and inventory, the timber staff will finalize the sale harvest areas and prepare the timber sales for advertisement and ultimate awards so that they can be implemented on the ground. And so that's it in a nutshell, what the next steps are. And that brings us to the very end of our meeting agenda, which is basically an overall question and answer session. We'll try and field as many questions as we can with the remaining time that we have. And so it looks like, Alan, you can go first. You had your hand up first, and it looks like we have Zach Porter in line to come up second.
In first designing and presenting this project, was your professional staff not aware of the damage that road building does to forests? I mean, I guess my follow-up is, why does it take public watchdogging for your specialist to come back with a plan that does not include new permanent roads?
Are you speaking to the original plan and the original approved activities of the amount of road building?
I am. It doesn't build trust.
Yeah, well, comment well taken. We heard and we listened and we responded. And so we've reduced the amount of road building accordingly to access the harvest stands that we're able to harvest and still achieve the objectives of the project. So yeah, guess there's not really how much more I can say to that. No permanent road construction, and temporary roads are limited to existing woods roads locations, and no more than 8.6 miles to be exact is what's in the actual final approved activities. So yeah, well, thank you for your comment, Alan. Zach, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Thanks again for holding the meeting tonight. I'm looking forward to the field trip on the 22nd. I appreciate you putting that together too. And my question is actually related to the field trip. I'm interested in, personally, just speaking for myself, visiting the logging that's proposed in the forest plan roadless area, which I believe is the South Fork timber sale. And I would really like to have a clear understanding from you all of, in this very sensitive landscape, again, with just a boatload of recent research about the critical value of roadless areas for biodiversity, for water quality, for any number of different benefits that we all rely on from our public forests, why this area warrants the management that you are all proposing. So I personally would really appreciate a chance to visit that site and better understand the rationale. So that's my vote for what it's worth. But thanks again for holding the meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you, Zach. And we'll try and work that into the field visit. I'm not 100% certain that South Fork timber sale is within even a forest plan revision version of a roadless area, but there is one close by. I do know that for a fact. But either way, we'll take a look at what you're requesting and try and work it into the field trip. Cheryl, looks like you have your hand up. You want to unmute your mic?
Yeah, and it worked this time, or it showed that it worked this time. I have a question about Biden's executive order of April 22nd. I think that was kind of too late to have an effect on the plan, but will it affect your decisions going forward with this? Like, are you going to amend anything, or, do you think that you might rethink it, any parts of the plan? And not only these three treatment areas, but others going forward in the Green Mountain, everywhere, not just Green Mountain. And how much does new research affect what you're doing? Because I think some of, it's a two-part question. Some of the research that is coming out is new. I mean, there's a lot of new stuff, and it's really showing that we have been doing things differently than we could be doing them. So how old does it have to be before the Forest Service starts using it?
Okay, I got two questions there. So
Sorry
the
about
first
that.
one is it's about the executive order from the president. And I think you're referring to the executive order requiring or requesting the Secretary of Agriculture to have the Forest Service conduct a inventory for old growth and mature forests agency-wide on all national forests. Is that the executive order you're speaking to?
Yes, and also to increase reforestation, but the other part of that is that you need to let some of that stuff get older.
Yeah.
That's not old yet.
Yep, no, understood. So it's too premature to know exactly what's going to come out of that that inventory process. It's ongoing. It's being done right now. The agency has a year to complete the inventory process. It's being done agency-wide. Every single national forest is included. The results of that inventory are going to feed into a consideration of a policy. I'm suspecting. It seems that that's the direction in the executive order, that there will be consideration of a policy of one situation or another, and we don't even know what that would be. So it's totally speculative to try and figure that out at this point in time. But no matter what ends up coming out of it, if it is anything that this or any other project that we have ongoing on the Green Mountain National Forest is not consistent with that policy, then of course we'd have to look at every one of the projects, including this one, to determine what it would take to modify, change, or whatever the case may be, to be consistent with that agency, national agency policy. So we'll just have to wait and find out, where we fall out on that one. And that really is the answer to your other question as well. I mean, how new or how old, I guess, does the science need to be before we consider changing it applicable to any project that we have ongoing? And what magnitude of that change or new information or scientific literature that comes out for us to consider changing course on a particular project. And that really depends on that scientific literature and what it's saying and how we consider it and how it applies to each project, including this one. And I know that's not probably a very definitive answer for you, but it really depends. And we do have a process where we review our existing projects that haven't fully been completed on the ground and figure out or determine if that new information or changed circumstances is going to necessitate or require a change to the project in some way. And so we'll be abreast of that and field it as it comes along. Just as an example, the northern long-eared bat is subject to being uplisted from threatened to endangered by the end of this year. And whatever comes out of the consultation process with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding that species, if there's anything that needs to be changed on this project or any other project that we have ongoing, will be made to be consistent and compliant with that consultation process. So, that's probably the best I can, do to answer your question right now, Cheryl. If there's any other things that you can think of that this didn't really satisfy you or not, just give Martina or I a call, and we'll see if we can continue the dialogue with you.
Thanks very much. I will.
We have a question from Laura and then Dennis. Go ahead, Laura. Laura Simon, go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hi, this is Fergus Marshall, not Laura.
Oh, you
I'm
don't look
with
like
Laura.
Laura.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm really concerned about a question that was asked earlier, or a statement, and it had to do with trust and about the latest science that Cheryl just brought up. And I would just like to know, again, how can we trust the Forest Service be using the latest science when it seems to be apparent that they're not? I just am just very, very concerned that this is going the wrong way. And the IPCC has said that we need to retain our forests, and we haven't got time. There's no time left, and we can't just turn a switch and have our forests magically appear again. Once they're gone for decades, 3, 4, 5 decades before they even start coming back. So I guess my question is, why is it that you guys aren't using the latest science? Thank you.
That's a good question. My answer back to you is we try to use the latest science. And in fact, it's a requirement for us to use the best available scientific information of all our environmental effects analyses and as we implement our projects on the national forest nationwide, not just here on the Green Mountain National Forest. And, there's a fire hose of scientific literature that is coming out daily, that changes daily. We try to keep abreast of it. We have a full interdisciplinary team of specialists on staff here on the Green Mountain National Forest, representing a vast array and diverse group of resource areas, from landscape architects to wildlife biologists to soil scientists, not to mention foresters. And so, we do the best to field through all that scientific literature and apply it to our effects disclosures and have it guide our line officers, in this case, Martina, to make the best decision that she can based on that scientifically based disclosure of effects. But as new information is known and made available, we try to incorporate that into our thinking as we implement our projects. And we have full access to agency-wide, at the Washington office level, some climate scientists and carbon scientists, to help us decipher and go through this scientific literature that is continually being made available for land managers. So I'm sorry that maybe that probably doesn't satisfy your question of trust, but I hope that I can convey to you that we take our job seriously, and we don't ignore science when it's telling us, what we feel is the best available scientific literature that's telling us how our activities are impacting all resources. And so I guess I'll just leave it at that. Dennis, Dennis, do you have a question?
Yes. So I noticed when they were on the 3 projects that they were going over earlier with the woman in charge, that there was a lot of reductions from the proposed cuttings as far as clear cuts. The acres that they were reducing by, eventually, does that add up to the 14,700 acres that the plan had been revised to? Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about your question, just trying to think about what is it you're asking. So as Jesse was showing, the overall stand that was approved for treatment, as we go into those areas in the forest on the ground, the timber staff is looking at the site-specific ground conditions and laying those out to adhere to the forest plan standards and guidelines and project-specific design criteria. So they're going to be reduced. There's wetlands, there's stream courses, there may be sensitive plants and archaeological or heritage sites that we need to avoid. So, and sensitive soils for that matter. So the area that we can actually harvest is reduced accordingly. To answer your specific question, the ultimate implementation acres in those stands, they may not ultimately all add up to 14,270 acres. That's the total that we can actually go up to. It's basically the pool acres that we start with. So it very well likely be actually less than that. But it's going to be a sale by sale basis determination on exactly how much that reduction will really be over the course of the project life of, well, now 13 years.
Yeah. And I just want to say that the science, I believe in your science. Our wildlife small game wildlife, and especially the birds, have been reduced to enormous quantities in the last, since the 1970s. So your science definitely supports the project that is going on for the next 10 years down there. And I thank you very much for that.
Thank you for your comment. Doesn't look like anybody has their hand raised, and I'm not monitoring the chat box. Has anybody seen any questions in the chat box that we haven't addressed yet?
Yeah, there may be one from Margot. We have successional habitat is very important for some wildlife and should be part of a mix of land management. However, I'm wondering if the percentage of successional habitat that you are trying to reach is a specific percentage for northern New England forests, or is this a national standard? Thank you for having this public engagement session.
Greg, you want to try and field that one?
Yeah, I think that answer is specifically in the EA, and I'm trying to pull that up in my head without going in and looking for it right now. But I think the answer is around 5% is the answer that we try to manage in that early successional habitat definition for this national forest. I don't believe that's a national standard. I don't even know if other New England national forests are doing the same thing, but I believe it's 5 to 10% for the various composition. So like the oak stands, aspen stands a little bit higher than that, and then some of the other stands. If you're interested in that specifically, I'd be happy to kind of go over that and pull that out of the project and or the forest plan for you.
Yeah, and that specific question actually is addressed in the question and answer document that we've been mentioning that's on the project website. It pulls the objectives, the age class for 0 to 9, regenerating the age class, which is defined as early successional habitat for the various types of forests, the various types of forest composition that exist on landscape on the Green Mountain National Forest. And there's a range. It depends on the actual forest type. It's in that document, so take a look at it, Margot. See if it makes any sense to you, and if you're confused or need clarification, just give us a call. Okay. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and we don't want to keep folks, past the time that we said that this meeting would end, because we know you have things going on on this fine spring evening, and so why don't we just say goodbye? Thank you for attending, and we will encourage you to look at our project website. We plan to post more information based on what we've heard from some of you tonight. We certainly will get that management area overlay map on the actual project harvest areas on these 3 timber sales that was requested. We can do that, and at the same time we can show you where the inventory wilderness area is overlay on those as well, just so you can see those all together. We'll post those on the website as well.
The proof is right out there. We'll look for.
Let's see what we got going on here.
Thank
Yeah, sorry, I just muted everybody because it sounded like some folks had their mics caught on. So Martina, do you have any parting words you'd like to share?
No, just wanted to echo what I put in the comments that, I wanted to, I wasn't here when the original, I'm not making excuses, but I can control what happens moving forward. So just want to, thank everyone for having this open dialogue. These are tough issues, and there's a lot of emotion and and passion, and I can hear that in the comments, and just want to appreciate your participation tonight, and I hope we can continue the dialogue on the field trip and in future meetings. So thanks again to everyone, and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Great, thank you, Martina. And three last things to leave you with. Martina and my contact information are in the chat. please feel free to contact either one of us if you have any questions or clarifications on any of this. The field trip information will be sent to you by middle of next week so that you'll know what to expect. If you can plan to attend, that would be great. And we'll try and come up with a good field trip that will show you what you're actually wanting to see on the ground. So in saying that, please fill out the survey if you can to let us know what you would like us to set up for those field visits. And last but not least, we did send out the notification for the public comment period to start and instructions on how to submit comments. If you are on this webinar, this team meeting, and you didn't receive that notification, please send me or Martina an email with your name and your email address so that we can make sure that you get placed on the mailing list for all notifications relative to this project for future reference. Because if you didn't get that notification this afternoon that was sent out around 4 o'clock this afternoon, then you're not on the mailing list. And we would like you to be on the mailing list if you want to be on the mailing list. So please send that information to us. And with that, I am going to say goodnight and thank you for participating.